Now, if you're somebody who's been following the financial independence, retire early movement, or generally just interested in the whole concept of financial independence, odds are you would have heard about this thing called the 4% rule. However, with the vast majority of media that covers it, I feel it tends to really oversimplify and gloss over certain things. That's why in today's video, I'm really setting out to try and answer some of the nuances that I think are really important for those of us who are following the 4% guide. Hey guys, it's Sunmin and welcome back to Your Money Game, the show where we'll save, invest and feel better about money. Super simplified, it's called the 4% guide because it's how much you can withdraw from your investment pool year after year to fund a retirement lifestyle forever. The reason why it got so famous is that when you reverse engineer that number, it makes it really easy for you to calculate how much you really need for financial independence. If you knew your annual desired lifestyle cost, all you needed to do was to multiply that by 25 to give you your FI number or financial independence number. Let's start with where did these findings come from. Now, this rule was taken from a 1998 piece of research that was conducted by 3 professors, and get this, in a place called the University of Trinity. They set out to answer a very simple but hard question, which is how much is a sustainable rate of withdrawal for retirement? They created 5 different portfolios which consisted of 2 things, which are stocks and bonds, and they just varied up the ratios between them. They then tested 4 different time periods of how long it lasted, and also included many different withdrawal rates from 3% all the way to 12%, so 3, 4, 5 and so on. The data that they used went from 1926 all the way to 1995, and for the stocks they simply used the S&P 500, and for the bonds they used high-grade corporate bonds. And after crunching all those numbers, that's how they got towards the 4% withdrawal rate, which was the optimal amount, and it comprised of the portfolio of 75% stocks and 25% bonds. Even accounting for inflation, that portfolio showed you a 98% success rate of having more than $0 at the end of 30 years. I've attached the original article that they published down below so you can read all about it, and actually it's quite an easy read. It's only 6 pages and it's not really too technical. Now let's get into the thick of it, which is what are the things that we might be overlooking. The first is that the longer the retirement period, the higher the odds of failure go up. Now this is really important for those of you who are planning to retire early, but don't really have any additional income sources. Now no one can really predict how long they'll live, but if you take statistics, the average lifespan here in Singapore is about 84 years. Now let's say you're lucky enough to plan your finances so well that you would retire at 50. That means you've got an additional 34 years in the future to plan for at the minimum. And as medicine continues to advance and improve, and likely you're the kind of person that will take care of yourself, your expected lifespan will likely be higher than 84. Second is that you would need to be comfortable to holding a fairly large amount of stocks in that portfolio even throughout retirement. Now this really goes against conventional wisdom, where most people tend to reduce the amount of stocks that they hold as they approach retirement. It's important to note that the research does not take that into account. To get that 98% success rate, you're looking at a 75% stocks and 25% bonds held all the way throughout retirement. Depending on your personality style, this might or might not be comfortable because naturally with more stocks, you can expect more volatility. Next is that you would be hoping that your investment returns in the future will match what has happened in the past. And this is especially true for those of you who are using a more passive investing style and simply buying something like the S&P 500. Remember that the research uses the S&P 500 as that benchmark, and its super long-term returns are about 10+% per annum. Also, the returns shown in the research does not take into account any fees or costs, So you really need to take that with a grain of salt as well. Next is a risk that's really difficult to plan for, and it's called the sequence of returns risk. Now, this really technical term simply means that at the point of retirement, when you start withdrawing money from that portfolio, it's possible that you do run into a period or sequence of really bad luck. It could be that year when the stock market starts to go down and right into a long bear market, or it could be a hyperinflationary period that erodes the value of our money. The silver lining here is that the research took into account World War II, and on top of that, a really bad inflationary period throughout the 1970s. But again, who knows what would happen in the future? Finally, it's important for us investors in Asia to remember that this research is of course American-centric. For those of us who are investing in Singapore or Malaysia, you need to remember that there's the 30% withholding tax on any form of dividends, because that actually makes a decent impact on the results. And beyond just taxes, who knows what other conditions might change in the future? What's not changing is that when you do click the like and subscribe button, it really does help tell YouTube to send this video out to more people, and it really helps my channel grow. So thanks. Now, you've heard me go on for quite a bit, and you might be thinking, oh my god, this is really depressing. It does sound like there's a lot of things that are maybe on the negative side to really take into account. And you might be wondering, is there anything positive at all to look forward to? Don't worry, I got your back. First, keep in mind that a 98% success rate is ridiculously good. Remember that the 2% failure rate occurred at the 30-year mark. Looking at the results, even at the 25-year mark, it was considered a 100% success rate. From a positive point of view, think about it this way. Your portfolio would have successfully funded your entire retirement lifestyle without any additional income put in for a total of 25 years minimum and up to 30 years. And that's where you got a 2% additional chance of it failing. I don't know about you, but I think those are pretty good odds and conditions. The actual likelihood would be that at the end of all that time, you would end up with multiple times more money than your starting point. Now, I bet that got your attention, right? Most people who cite the Trinity study forget about this thing called the terminal rate, which answers the question, how much is left in that portfolio at the end of the entire simulation? With that specific 75-25 portfolio, the median result, or the more likely result, is that your portfolio's value at the end of 30 years would be 8 times larger. Imagine if you had an FI number of $1 million at the end of a 30-year period. It is actually the most likely thing that you would end up with $8 million. Now, this doesn't take into account inflation, but even if you did, that's still many times the original amount which you started with. Now, I find this really encouraging, especially for those of you who are planning to leave a legacy to your kids, but even for individuals who are just thinking about your own personal consumption and lifestyle. This is a pretty big deal, and it's actually related to my next point. The 4% withdrawal rate is actually considered conservative by some people. A now retired financial planner named William Bengen actually beat the Trinity study guys when he published his own research a couple of years earlier, and his conclusions were the same. He still came to a conclusion of roughly 4%. What's really interesting is that both William Bengen as well as the original Trinity study did say that 4% was considered quite conservative. William Bengen even came out late last year and suggested that today he would consider using something like 4.5%. Now, there are two ways you can interpret this. You could use it to recalculate your financial independence number. And this is a big deal because it actually reduces the amount that you theoretically need, and you could reach FI even faster. Or you can just read the conclusion and say to yourself, great, I'll just stick to the 4% rule and feel comforted by the fact that there's an additional buffer in there that I don't need to plan for, which keeps me safer. Next is that even with new data included, the original research findings seem to hold true. I found a guy named the Poor Swiss who did some really interesting research where he added additional data into the simulation to run the numbers again. And again, the long story short is that the conclusions are the same. I attach a link to his article below in the description so you can read more about it. And it's quite interesting because he also tried to simulate what would happen in longer retirement periods, so beyond 30 years all the way up to 50 years. Now, my final point for optimism is that if you do take into account the CPF or the EPF in Malaysia, your actual risk of failure is going to be lower. And it's because at the end of your working life, you would still have this additional bonus pot of money that's going to be handed out to you. So what I'm personally doing is that I'm excluding my CPF calculations when I'm thinking about this FI number. And the reason why is that I'm a relatively new permanent resident here in Singapore. That's why my actual CPF store isn't really that high anyway. The other reason why I've excluded it is that you only have so much control when it comes to those funds and how to invest them. Odds are it's impossible to replicate a 10% plus return over the long term with those CPF funds. And if you take that into account, you could, one, reduce the amount of money that you might want to plan for that financial independence portfolio, or two, allow yourself a little bit more flexibility in your withdrawal rate in the future. So there's really quite a lot to be optimistic for. So is there a conclusion, or are we just ready to celebrate? The way I see it, continue to use the 4% guide as a really good useful goalpost, and as you get closer towards your actual retirement, that's when you can begin to think about more options. And I've said it in videos before, to me, financial independence is really about options. And honestly speaking, if you're the kind of person who watches videos like this and you've made it this far, I'm really confident that you're adaptable, you're resourceful, you're flexible, and we'll be able to figure something out the closer we get to those retirement points. So thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you got value out of this. If you did, I would really appreciate your support in clicking that like, subscribe and bell button, because I'll be back again next Sunday with a brand new video. And until then, you take care and keep playing your own game.